Welcome to Is This a Great Game or What? And our special guest this week is my dear friend, Steve Rushin. He is the best author I have ever read. He's the greatest writer I have ever read. And he can still really shoot a basketball. Stretch, welcome back. And here's Jeff. Say hi to Jeff again for the third straight year.
Hello, Jeff. Hi, Tim. Do I get like the three-timers jacket or anything?
We need to start sending those out. We do.
Right.
Can I make a suggestion, like the satin starter jacket that pitchers used to wear when they ran the bases? You just need the one sleeve.
At Stretch, we miss that, don't we? The pitchers
Completely.
who put a jacket on even in 90-degree weather to run the bases, right?
I love April baseball now. I love like guys in balaclavas, on the base paths, and fans, in blankets, but watching that, I thought how much I missed pitchers, taking a 6-inch lead or no lead at all in the satin jacket.
Right. And Stretch, you're old enough to remember when we used to have bullpen cars.
Oh my gosh.
And Jeff, you're too young to understand that the Mariners used to have a ship, like a boat, that would take the reliever into the game. He would get in a little boat and they would drive him to the mound. Stretch, you remember that stuff, right?
Of course. That was the peak of, like as with pop music, where I remember every lyric from every song that I heard from about age 8 to 16. That's the baseball that is still burned into my memory. And that bullpen car is still on display at Fenway. But that's when they had the Rolaids relief man, the fireman of the year, and you put on the fire hat. And, I love that cheesy stuff.
Right. But that's what makes baseball so great. It's the cheesiest sport in the world, but it's also the most charming sport and the most hilarious sport.
Literally the cheesiest. When I saw was it the Rangers with the Nachos sombrero this year? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, of course.
I mean, it's what more do you need? You don't even feel the team. I'm there. You've got me. Take my money.
This is what you need, Steve.
Oh my
this is really what you need right here.
You say I need that. I have a Philly Fanatic Sunday helmet in the cabinet. I've got a stack of them. A lot of them are dishwasher wore the logos off of most of them, but I still have a green one in the cabinet. I mean, I could go 3 feet from where I'm sitting now and pull out a Mets nacho batting helmet that I got at a game last year, and I couldn't finish and was like on the Whitestone Expressway. The helmet was in the shotgun seat, and I was eating. That's a problem. It's when you take these foods out of their natural environment. Eating helmet nachos at the game, no harmful health effects. Eating helmet nachos in your car, not good.
It's like movie theater popcorn at your house, It just doesn't taste the same.
Our now 21-year-old, when she was like 4 or 5, wanted to go to her first movie, Kung Fu Panda. When we got to the theater and we got to the entrance to the actual, screen 4 or whatever, she saw the Kung Fu Panda poster looking kind of crazy, and she saw this dark tunnel, and she wouldn't go, and she screamed. I was trying to, force her into the theater, and finally I said, all right, we're going home. And I drove home with the giant, massive movie theater popcorn bucket, and in the 64-ounce Diet Coke, and I felt like a monster. But in the darkness of the theater, it's the best.
Right.
Yeah, people don't realize that you don't have to get a movie ticket in order to go get the popcorn. You could just go get the popcorn. Let's keep movie theaters alive. Go get the popcorn, get the drink, and head on home.
But you really do, in the cold light of day. The movie theater popcorn bucket, with, as Jerry Seinfeld says, with the ear flaps, so you can just eat directly out of it. Not a good look.
I will say, Dad, before we move on from the Fanatic really fast, my daughter has a little night light, and I can change the color on my phone. And every single night, I let her pick a color. She gets to pick the color. I put it up on my phone. So last night, she picked green, and she looks at me and goes, green, like Christmas and the Fanatic. It's like... Two of her favorite things in the world, Christmas and the Philly Fanatic. Although her other favorite mascot is Otto the Orange, and she thinks they live together, which is a sitcom in itself. She goes, is Otto the Orange going to be there? And I said, no, they live kind of far apart from each other.
That's funny, because our oldest, who was terrified of Kung Fu Panda, was completely terrified. We took her to a lot of college basketball games because my wife was, broadcasting college basketball, and Testudo, the Maryland Terrapin,
right? Yeah,
terrifying. And I was slightly terrified by this big shelled mascot, but I think to this day she has PTSD from Testudo.
Well, talk about being scared, Stretch. At Christmas time, unfortunately, I took my shirt off around my then 2-year-old granddaughter, Emma, and she looked at me with my shirt off. This is right at Christmas time, and said, Pop, you look like the Grinch. The Grinch is a green, hairy, old animal, and that's what Emma Keenahan thought. Pop, look like funny. Pop, you look like the Grinch. How about that?
I can't speak to the physical resemblance, but there has never been anybody more spiritually the opposite of the Grinch than Kurkjian. So you have that going for you.
Well, thank you, Stretch. So on our podcast the other day, it's Masters Week, of course. Now, this interview right here won't run until Tuesday, but I asked Jeffrey, who's a very good athlete, but has not figured out golf yet. I'm not sure how many people have figured out golf yet, but I gave him a 6-shot lead going into the 18th hole at the Masters. We're going to drop him on the 18th tee with Scotty Scheffler and Bryson DeChambeau. And the question was, could Jeffrey Kurkjian, who's probably a 20 handicap, he's got a good swing, but he just hadn't played enough, can he hold a 6-shot lead at the Masters?
And Steve, before you answer, I have a qualm with the internet, because I posted this on the internet the first day of the Masters, right? And it blew up. 500,000 people viewed it, thousands of comments, and the amount of people that aren't listening to the question who say, you're telling me I have a 6-shot lead on 18? I just played a great day. I'm definitely and I'm saying, no. You didn't just play 17 holes of golf 6 under. No. You're dropped in right now, 3 beers deep on 18. You're dead.
I love that the two most obvious statements in human history were just uttered in the last paragraph. One, that Jeff hasn't mastered golf yet. Nobody has. That's not a statement about his ability. Nobody has. And 2, he has a qualm with the internet? No, come on. So I honestly thought when you were giving me the premise that Jeff had a 6-shot lead and he was dropped onto the 18th green. And I was still going to say no. Not a chance. We're talking galleries, TV cameras.
Yes,
the
Jim
whole nine.
Nance.
Yeah,
you're playing with the two of the best players in the world. There are fans lining the 18th fairway.
I would encourage listeners who aren't familiar with Jean Van de Velde to look up that name, because I would see a similar epic meltdown. I think you'd hit your first 3 tee shots into the gallery if you got off the box.
And people in the comments, Steve, were saying, like, they were listing out their clubs, and they said, I'd go 7-iron, 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 4 putts for a 7. So they're like kind of thinking logically, okay, you're putting at least 4 times, because these greens are unheard of from what you've dealt with at your local muni, right? It's not even close.
I don't want to discourage this. I want this to happen, but only if Tim is in a white jumpsuit with your name on the back. He's on the bag. Let's make this happen.
Now, in the hypothetical, my dad said, you have a caddy, and I kind of had to say, that's not going to help, because the caddy could say, how far do you hit your pitching wedge? And I say, well, if I shank it, it's 63 yards. If I hit it well, it's 130, but I never am consistent. So his job is impossible at that point.
Well, this is what I loved about, as much as I loved covering baseball with Tim, I preferred even more these kind of questions, these endless scenarios that he posed, after the game or between innings or during the game. If you had 30 carries in an NFL game, would you gain positive yardage? No, you'd be disabled after the first, carry. But assuming that didn't happen, you'd be running in the opposite direction. But we had those. I love that there are still questions like the hypotheticals for you to come up with.
Stretch, I don't think I've ever asked you this. Jeff, I've made this clear. Steve Rushin can really shoot a basketball, especially in his prime.
Oh, this is a good one. Okay.
God comes to you right now and gives you a half an hour to get loose. You get one shot from the top of the key. If you make it, you make every shot from the three-point line in for the rest of your life. Every shot you take from the three-point line in, you make it every time, okay? But if you miss from the top of the key, then you will never make another shot the rest of your life. So when your grandchild comes to you and says, Pop, teach me how to shoot a basketball, and then you go to shoot a layup and you can't even make a layup at 6'5", would you take the bet right now if you're Steve Rushin?
Not a chance. Not a chance, because I missed that shot. I may have already taken that bet and lost, because I haven't made a shot in about 10 years, Tim. I'm happy to go with your premise that I'm a great shooter, but it's been a long time. And when our kids were in middle school, we had parents played against the kids, and some parents took it too seriously. But every 10th time I got the ball, I'd cast up a jumper in a unfamiliar gym. And, the first time you cast one of those up and you airmail it in front of a bunch of seventh graders and their parents who only know you from the carpool lot, it doesn't encourage you to keep shooting.
Right.
Yeah, Steve, I feel bad for you, because my dad and I have one thing on our side, which is our height. So we show up to a gym, a father-son game, or whatever it might be, and the expectation for us, no pun intended, is low. But if you're 6'5" and your nickname is Stretch, they say, give it to the big man in the middle, and he'll dunk on everybody. And if you airmail it, they think, oh, it's like Stanley in The Office, Dad. He gets drafted first and he stinks.
If they see 59-year-old me and say, give it to him, he can dunk it, we are definitely playing in an 80 and over league, right? Am I on 6 foot hoops? Because my 17-year-old high school senior, who was played year round, a couple of years ago, in the spring we went out during the tournament and into the driveway for our annual dad backs son down and throws up some jump hooks. And I did that thinking that, it was the previous year, and I've been able to do this my whole life. And I backed him down, threw up a jump hook. He blocked it in such a way that I still feel that he may have torn my rotator cuff. So I knew when he was 16 and I was 58 that it was long over.
Right. How tall is your son?
He's my height. He's 6'5".
Oh my goodness!
But he's like a size 15 shoe. So he's got big hands, long arms. He's just he's a rangy dude.
Right.
He was at a college football game last year at Notre Dame, and his cousins go to Notre Dame, and he was in the student section. And when they score a touchdown, they put somebody on their hands, and they, for the first 7 points, they do like 7, push-ups of this body in the student section. And it was a game that they beat Syracuse 70-7. But the first touchdown, they took him, he's like the blow-up thing outside the used car dealership. So they put him on their hands, and they did 7 push-ups with him, the crowd, and they set him down, and one of the guys said, okay, you're done for the rest of the day. By the time you're too unwieldy, So by the time they got, they got to 70, they were pushing up more wieldy kids.
Right. This is a bit self-serving, Jeff, but Stretch, you were going through the garage, you told me, like 10 years ago, cleaning out old stuff or something, and you found something that I had bought for your son for...
Yes.
Right. What was it?
That was the Fisher-Price lawnmower that you filled with soap and it blows bubbles as you mow the lawn. I mean, we love that thing.
But you explained to him that Tim Kurkjian got him this,
yes,
right? And
of course. Every time, I think I was still telling him this as recently as last year. We would see you on TV. I said, "There's Tim. He gave you the bubble blowing lawnmower." So
And the craziest thing is you did it for his 16th birthday,
yes,
right,
exactly.
Dad?
Exactly. I mean, and I had it retrofit with an actual blade so he could mow the lawn, but no,
and still blow the bubbles.
Yeah, exactly. I cleaned the garage just this spring, and we still have a red radio flyer wagon. Our youngest is 15. Nobody's using that anymore, but I can't get rid of it, and it's exactly what we talk about when we talk about the nostalgia of growing up with baseball. And I don't know, we have no use for this, but I'm not getting rid of it. And involuntarily, that's what baseball is for me. March Madness, I'm in an annual bracket pool, and I had to put into the box a name, not my own, kind of like when you have to give a rock star gives a false name at a hotel or something. So without thinking, I typed in Bob Apodaca. Why? Why? Why did that name pop into my head among an infinite number of possibilities?
Jeff, he was a journeyman pedestrian relief pitcher in the major leagues.
He pitched for the Mets in 1975. But I had his baseball card.
Right.
So
good.
This
is extremely self-serving. Before we move on from your kids and children and all of that stuff, Steve, and it's self-serving because I'm promoting our own podcast interview, a previous one with you. My dad and I still laugh to this day when I asked you, Steve, so you have 2 or 3 kids, right? And I was going towards a question, and you said, yes, that's right. I have 2 or 3 kids.
Well,
we still bring that up, Dad, weekly.
I'm going to say a name, and I want to see if Tim can react to this. Now, Jeff will think this was a guy who played for the Cardinals in 1973, but Kotubi Leister. What does that mean? Anything to you, Tim? Tim knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know exactly who Kotubi Leister is.
Our friend who made his own Stratomatic cards at his own Stratomatic league, populated with entirely made up names with their own backstories. And the one name I remember, Kotubi Leister. It's bad enough to remember real guys from the 70s,
right?
But remembering fake guys from the 70s is worse.
Right. And Stretch, you bring up baseball cards. And by the way, speaking of pedestrian relievers, Don Carmen was once called a pedestrian relief pitcher. And he honestly said, I have no idea where that came from. He must have seen me walking across the street. So he took it quite literally that he was a pedestrian relief pitcher. But Stretch, we love baseball cards. I'm going to put you on the spot here in a few minutes. But your favorite baseball card growing up, your guy, tell us again, George Mitterwald.
George Mitterwald it's George Mitterwald Day when Immaculate Grid has a Twins-Cubs intersection, and I will screenshot it and send it to Tim. Happy George Mitterwald. It doesn't happen often, but I'm thrilled when it does. George Mitterwald was a Twins catcher when I was 6, 7, and I loved the name. I loved his 1974 tops. I loved the little cartoon on the back of the tops with the fun fact that said George likes to take home movies. Because George, unique among all of humankind at the time, had a camera that could take video, something that everybody has in their pocket now. But at the time, that was the fun fact about George. Tim, when Davy Lopes died recently, I texted my childhood buddy in Minnesota and said, I just said Yeager, Garvey, Lopes, Russell, Say. And he replied, Fosse, Tennis, Green, Campaneris, Bando. And then I replied with like the Reds infield, from the same time. And we could do this all day. And especially sort of at the dawn of free agency, when you had these set lineups, why do we still remember them?
Right. And Stretch, this is why we do this podcast. This is why I still cover baseball after all these years. This stuff still matters to people. People love football. They love basketball, but they don't just name linebackers or offensive lines for teams like you just did for baseball. I'm right about this, right?
100%. And I love, when Jeff talks about his daughter with the Fanatic. I love that you've passed this. I'm not sure it's a healthy thing, but on to a third generation, because I think that it is just as magical or potentially magical to a kid today. I don't think Dylan Dingler is any less of a magical name than John Bacabella was to me. It's the 2026 World Series was, unbelievable. It was as exciting, interesting, full of crazy drama as any there has ever been. I was jumping up and down in front of the TV during Ohtani's Game 3. So this isn't just nostalgia, like, oh, I wish I was 8 again. It's just a thing that for me continues.
Right. So, Stretch, I looked up in George Mitterwald on Baseball Reference today, and it says his nickname is Baron von Mitterwald. Have you ever heard that?
Of course,
Stretch, he's your favorite player. Yeah. We've talked about him 100 times. How could I not have known? And how could that be on Baseball Reference? Baron von Mitterwald? I don't get it.
A great nickname is one that's 5 times longer than the guy's actual name. Come on, that's not his. Nobody thinks of him as that.
Yeah, my favorite nickname ever is a catcher named Doug Goosh, who spelled his name Gwodsz.
Of course.
And Doug Rader, your favorite, Doug Rader, looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, I played with him. His nickname was Eye Chart." And I said, "What does that mean?" He goes, "Well, put your hand up over your eye." And that's his name, Again, baseball, more than any other sport, lends itself to such stupid things, correct?
Completely.
Stretch, a year ago this time, the White Sox, we found out that the Pope's favorite team was the White Sox. And you told us without any preparation that he's the only Pope that has ever seen Wade Nordhagen wearing shorts. He's the only Pope that ever has uttered the sentence, "I'm stealing all your stuff." Pitch at risk to Richie Ziz.
When you mentioned the White Sox, I probably said this last year when you mentioned the White Sox. I think of The Sound of Music, Edelweiss, but Karkovice, singing Karkovice to Edelweiss. Why?
Karkovice.
I knew you had the vocal chops, Jeff. I want to hear that. You should record that.
Right. Jeffrey can really sing.
I know.
And in 96, Stretch, Ron Karkovice became the first player ever to go 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts on opening day. The first player ever to do that. It's been done twice in the last 3 years. So he's not the only one now, but only you, Stretch, would come up with Karkovice. And
this is why players throughout history have loved the scribes who covered them, because here's a guy who did the impossible, one of 20,000 guys to make the major leagues and have a sustained career. And what are our takeaways from his long, successful career? His name sounds like Edelweiss, and he whipped 5 times on opening day.
You mentioned, talk about the way we look at writers. Kirby Puckett, every time I saw Kirby Puckett for like a 5-year period, he would always come up to me and say, "Ron Say, how you doing?" So he thought somehow that I look like Ron Say. Now, granted, Ron Say was short, but he wasn't small. I am short and small. Ron Say weighed 210 pounds. It could really hit. But he would always call me Ron Say.
So are you the Penguin or the Grinch? I'm confused. He didn't see you shirtless. So. Well, Ron Say, in that Dodger infield. So at that time, there was no better thing than for me going to Met Stadium to a Twins game and getting the All-Star ballot. You punch out the Chads, the hanging Chads.
Right.
When there was that Supreme Court controversy, Bush Gore, and they were talking about the hanging Chads. Anybody who ever punched out an analog All-Star ballot knew exactly what a hanging Chad was. And for third base in the National League, there was always that every year, Say. And as a kid, I don't know when this changed. I thought he was Ron Key because I'd never heard his name said. And it's just C-E-Y, and I pronounced that Key as a kid. So I always thought of him as Ron Key.
That's what Kirby would have said to me. Hey, Ron Key, good to see you.
Coming back, I was in Minneapolis after the '92 All-Star game, and landed at MSP, and he must have been on the same plane in a different class of travel than I. And I waited at baggage claim at MSP with Kirby Puckett. And Tim, I tell you, there were 100 people or 200 people and about 9 bags, but all crowded around the baggage claim because they saw Kirby standing there. And while we were there, nobody approached him. And like movie theater popcorn in the car or eating helmet nachos at home, Kirby Puckett at an airport baggage claim was so out of context that people were just kind of, freaked out by it, frankly.
Right.
So
I can imagine. So last night's stretches, I'm fascinated by baseball names. I always have been. Just like you, they make me laugh out loud. So last night we had in the Padres Rockies game, we had a Morgan Freeman at bat. So it was David Morgan against Tyler Freeman. And it reminded me of when you came up with one of the great battery names in the history of baseball, when Bud Black, I'll let you take it from here, Bud Black threw to...
Well, it wasn't the Bud Black Steve Decker.
Yes.
Oh, Black and Decker. Okay. This is I can't tell what's in my head and what I've said out loud over the years, but I love those matchups more than I love the matchup itself. Just these things on paper can occupy me for forever. But Tim, you're the same way. You see these all the time, and you note
right.
them, and
right.
just the names. I mentioned Dylan Dingler. My wife was at a Hartford Yard Goats game here, AA affiliate of the Rockies, and they must have been playing the Tigers AA team at the time, because I remember my wife coming back from the game and saying, these baseball names, I mean, are they just making them up? And I think that was Dylan Dingler and Colt Keith. I think both were in that game. And,
right.
and I said, it's a nature or nurture thing. I think some people, are naming their kids so that they become Major League Baseball players, because, Dylan Dingler is I mean, he's an express train to the big leagues with that name.
Right.
Well, when I was living in Las Vegas, I went to a Las Vegas Aviators game, and leading off for the Aviators, Sky Bolt.
I mean, unreal.
Are you kidding me? Sky Bolt. And I'll tell you, we just announced that our son, who's due in June, Steve, is his name is Bodie, Bodie, Bodie Bell Kurkjian, middle name Bell after my dad's middle name. So just out of curiosity, as I don't think my dad has done it yet, but I typed in Bodie into Baseball Reference, and I thought, all right, let's see if any players are named Bodie, not a terribly common name. And the only name that came up, Dad, I haven't even told you this, is a guy who played in the early 1900s for the White Sox and the Yankees named Ping Bodie.
Ping Bodie,
P-I-N-G.
Now, is that not the perfect baseball name, Ping Bodie?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's onomatopoeia. It's like if you had played in the aluminum bat era, Ping Bodie, that's like a double off the wall. That's a sound you make, right? At the College World Series.
Ping Bodie.
Right. So just to finish.
This is how sick this has gotten. We go off on a tear about Ping Bodie and the College World Series. 10 minutes later, oh, by the way, Jeff, congratulations. Is this how your dad heard the news when you told him? Oh, Ping! Oh, by the way, congrats.
Right. Ping Bodie played for the Yankees in 1917.
Yeah, talk about Well, this is a true story. Sadly, when Kelly Kurkjian met her husband-to-be, Mark, she was explaining who he was, and I think my first question to her was, "Can he shoot the 3?" And And thank goodness that he could. He's a good three-point shooter.
Don't be bringing home any mid-range jump shooting garbage.
So just to finish, so I love batteries also. We're coming up on the anniversary of Dan Quisenberry pitching to Jamie Quirk, the first QQ battery ever. One of my favorite, of course, is when Glenn Abbott pitched to Marty Castillo. And so that's Abbott and Castillo. But Steve Rushin turned Black and Decker. I mean, we all noticed that, but he said on the days that they worked, Decker wore the power tools of ignorance. I've used that line 1,000 times from him, and he told it to us 30 years ago.
No one can ever kind of use the cliche again about the sort of sitcom of the husband who didn't remember the anniversary. Tim remembers the anniversary. It's the anniversary of Quisenberry Quirk, mind you, but it's an anniversary.
And speaking of names, and Steve Rushin grew up Catholic, as we've talked about, I think, before. And on Easter Sunday, in the night game between the Cardinals and the Tigers, we had a DeJesus face a Church. So it was DeJesus faced a guy named Church on Easter Sunday, and Nathan Church plays for the Cardinals. So these are the kind of things that baseball just throws out there. And if you're paying attention, you can actually see it. And unfortunately, those are the dopey things that I pay attention to more than most people.
You actually know baseball as well. I'm the guy who is just noting that Church is playing for the Cardinals while eating out of my own hat, my own sombrero. I can't tell you a four-seamer from a slider, but I can give you the 74 Orioles infield. So
right, it's amazing.
Yeah, well, Steve, speaking of Catholicism, we loved having Dan Patrick on. I think that was 2 years ago now, Dad. And his favorite player was Jesus Alou growing up. But he always wanted to be at the ballpark, and he had to get dragged every Sunday morning to church. And so he would commonly mistaken Jesus Christ for Jesus Alou. So he would be at the ballpark, and he'd say, "Hey, there's Jesus." And he'd be at church, and he'd say, "All praise Jesus." And Dad would say, no, that one's Jesus. That one's Jesus. Jesus didn't die for our sins. Jesus did.
It's unreal when you say something like that. What just rattles out of my brain. We would go to Twins games after Mass on the Sunday afternoon games. We'd go from Mass to Cal's Market on Old Shakopee Road in Bloomington, where my dad. What did peanuts cost at the ballpark in 1977? A nickel?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
But he would go to
20
Cal's
cents
Market
at the most.
Yeah,
right.
to get a 1 pound bag of peanuts in a brown paper bag because they were cheaper there. I mean, we paid more in gas to get them than they cost at the ballpark. But then we would sit and the shells would pile up at our feet. The husks would adhere to our front teeth, so we looked like jack-o'-lanterns. And you couldn't have been happier. And of course, you had 6 ounces of sun-kissed orange to wash down 3 pounds of peanuts, and that's where this all began. So.
Right. So, Stretch, a year ago, I also told you, to your surprise, that I went into the Stratomatic Hall of Fame, which you got such a kick out
of. That's right.
And I need to follow up that I don't think I ever told you that I also went into the Armenian Sports Hall of Fame.
You didn't tell me that.
It was quite an honor. So please, if I joke about this, I'm not joking.
No,
it was
of course.
Great
Congrats.
honor. But they called me like a week before, and it was in LA. So I had to fly 3,000 miles. And I asked them, do I need to make a speech? And they said, yes, we would love for you to speak, but can you keep your speech under 30 seconds? 30
under 30 seconds.
Seconds. So I told one really quick story, and that was about all that I had time for, under 30 seconds. But the best part was I was introduced in between Garo Yepremian.
I was just going to ask if Garo Yepremian handed you the award.
Garo Yepremian was right before me. Then there was me. Then there was Era Parsegian, who's one of the Stretch. What about that juxtaposition? Me in between those two guys.
Then Steve Sarkisian walked you off the stage. I mean, phenomenal. I just like the idea of you getting up to the microphone, getting the award, and then the band playing you off 5 seconds into your 30-second speech. We're running over time. The last guy spoke for 35 seconds. So sorry about that.
We're keeping it tight.
Yeah.
Stretch, we'd love a story about hot dogs, but we want to keep it to 140 characters
exactly.
if you don't mind.
Yeah. So
how long was the hot dog story that you wrote in Sports Illustrated?
I mean,
how many pages?
I've written a few, baseball and food are so conjoined with me, but, those old bonus pieces in SI were usually about 5,000 words.
Right.
Sometimes longer.
Is this the One Nation underdog story?
I think so.
Which I think is one of my favorite titles of all time. One Nation underdog.
Yeah. We talk about, the sombrero nachos and all that. I like that. It's a good hook. SNY Mets broadcast this year. They're having their sideline guy, Steve Gelbs, rate not the novelty hot dog, not the goofy food stuff, the rock solid bread and butter hot dog in each park on the road during the course of the season. So to me, that's kind of like a cliffhanger streaming series. I'm going to stay tuned to see who wins that competition because I'm into that stuff.
Steve, all joking aside, I think that is the beauty of baseball broadcasting. You don't see a hockey broadcaster talking about anything other than trying to get through all the Swedish names and how quickly they pass to each other. There's no sort of relationship built respectfully within the game. I mean, of course, on the period breaks and everything, yes, these broadcasters are probably the most talented when it comes to hockey broadcasting. It's just a next level of mind-bending ability, but baseball broadcasters, man, when it's July and you're 80 games in, you're got to be telling some stories.
Even if it's April and you've got a 3.5-hour game, I mean, it's what I love about watching it. It's just on. It's just sonic wallpaper for the 6 months, and I just love hearing the guy, trying to catch the foul ball and it goes off his chest and into the first deck. And, they replay that and talk about it for the next inning and a half. It's nothing is happening that is more important than, them also digressing into 60s Batman characters or whatever. It's just, it's what I love.
I used to keep a list of Batman characters in my wallet. No longer, but that was
why
bad.
Why in your wallet?
Just in case someone asked me out one night, how many of them could you name? I could name about 20 at one point. It was so bad.
If you have a list of Batman characters in your wallet, nobody's asking you out at night, Tim. And I just love the sort of pre-digital aspect of this. I type all kinds of crazy things into my notes app on my phone, but back in the day, you had to keep your list of Batman characters in your wallet.
It was terrible. And speaking of broadcasters, I've told this story before. This is 10 years ago. I'm driving around, and Vin Scully's doing a game in the afternoon on XM radio. It's the greatest thing ever. And Socrates Brito comes to bat for the Arizona Diamondbacks. That's his real name, Socrates Brito.
He was at the same time as Al Albuquerque is walking the earth. It's just unbelievable. And they both end up in baseball.
So Vin Scully tells a story about the Socrates, and he gets like typical of Vin. He gets a 12-pitch at bat where he can tell us all about the time of the Trojan horse, and there's ball one, and then he continues. So at the end of the at bat, we know all about the Socrates, and only these things could be spun that way by Vin Scully.
Unbelievable. I had a few long conversations with Vin Scully at Dodger Stadium for stories, and the last two times I know for sure, I told Dodger PR, they told Vin he would be expecting me. I I was at wherever at the appointed hour. No Vin. I went to the booth and said, reminded him. It seemed to be the first he'd heard of it, but sure, let's go into the little sit down food area in the Vin Scully press box and talk to me for an hour and a half. Just telling stories.
Wow.
Unprepared, just spinning these magical tales. And I remember like passing a Dodger game once on TV, and there was some, the Dodgers had a rally that was thwarted. Somebody was up with runners on, down a run, and they grounded out to end the inning or something. And Vin Scully, who has called a million games, and said, he didn't say, there goes the rally is snuffed out. He said, the saddest words of tongue and pen, what might have been. And that was they went to like a commercial for Tidy Bowl, and I was like, how do you do that? I mean, an unbelievable guy. But I remember him telling me, just as a kid in New York in the 1920s or 30s, lying under the giant radio that they had and just letting the sound of the radio wash over him like waves, and I mean, this is all just off the cuff pouring out of him, and to get to see that on a Dodgers broadcast, it should be something you see at Carnegie Hall.
Right. All right, Stretch.
I have an unfortunate memory of Vin Scully association. I was living in New York City, and it was June of 2014, and it was Clayton Kershaw's no-hitter. So I see it's like the seventh inning, and I'm starting my walk home. So I put it in my headphones, I turn on my phone, and I'm listening to the game. And I'm so enthralled. I'm not even like paying attention to where I'm there because he's painting this amazing photo and this picture. And I'm living in New York at the time, so I'm doing the same. In fact, embarrassingly, I was so scared I would get off at the wrong subway stop, I decided to walk the 24 blocks every single day to work instead of taking one subway to get there in no time at all. So my commute was like 40 minutes instead of 5, but I was too scared to get on the subway because I thought I'd miss my stop.
Right.
Does it sound like somebody you know, Steve, by the way?
Right.
But here I am. I'm full-blooded New Yorker now, right? I hate tourists. I'll get out of my way. What are you doing? Well, now I'm the tourist because I almost got clipped by a biker delivering pizza. The most New York thing ever because I'm not paying attention to when I'm supposed to walk. And he says, well, I'm not going to say it on the podcast, but you know what he screamed at me during the 9th inning, 1 out, and I'm listening to Vin Scully. So now every time I think of Clayton Kershaw, no-hitter, or Vin Scully, I think of almost getting killed by a pizza delivery man in New York City.
Right.
I thought you were going to say you when you had an unfortunate incident with Vin Scully in New York City that you had, Vin had gone off on you, but
He was delivering the pizza.
I did say to Vin, well into his 80s, when was he was talking about, being Ebbets Field and calling his first World Series and all this. And I asked him, do you go back to Brooklyn? Do you ever go back to, where the Ebbets Field was, the Ebbets Field apartments are now? And he said, and I said, when was the last time you're in Brooklyn? And he said, I haven't been back since the final Dodger game. And he was calling Mets games in Queens, as a Dodgers broadcaster for years. He never went back to Brooklyn. I couldn't believe that.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
All right, Stretch, just switching gears for a minute. Bam Adebayo got 83 points in an NBA game the other day. Now, look, I'm not some fun hater. 83 is 83. But when you saw that a guy scored 83 points in an NBA game, and I think he took 42 free throws, something like that. Yeah. What was your thought on that?
They were playing the Wizards, right?
Yes.
I knew they were playing the Washington Wizards or the Washington Generals for one thing. But I'm not a fun hater either. But that struck me as absurd. Kobe, sure. Wilt, obviously. I remember when McHale scored 50 something and Larry the next night, the same week had to score 50, 7 or whatever. But yeah, I was surprised that Bam was the guy. But that's kind of, guys in the NBA are going for gigantic numbers more often than not, more often than they used to, certainly. So when my son actually that night, I'd gone to bed. He came into our room and he said, somebody scored 83 points tonight in the NBA. Who do you think it was? And I said, Luka. And he said, no. And so I guessed a couple of other names. And I said, is this somebody I'm going to guess? He said, no, you wouldn't guess it in 100 guesses. So, but you go ahead, be hateful, Tim. What did you think?
No, I thought I was amused because I had heard the day before from an NBA player, I forget who it was, that the game today is way more physical than it was 40 years ago. And I laughed out loud when I heard that. And then I laughed even harder the next day because the thought of the Pistons or the Knicks or the Celtics allowing somebody to get down the lane that many times without getting clobbered and get to the line 42 times. Stretch, I'm right about this. I'm not an old man, right?
You're absolutely right about that. But when you say the game is more physical now, there is some truth to, not in McHale clotheslining Rambis and that kind of stuff. That doesn't happen. But if you watch the Michigan UConn men's college final, I mean, you either call 1,000 fouls or you don't call any. That is so physical that it's aesthetically not pleasing to watch.
Right. Oh, I totally agree with that. So, Stretch, speaking of basketball, just tell Jeff one more time the 2-on-2 game that you and I played with at the Upper West Side at the Reebok Club.
With each passing year or decade now, it grows even greater in mythology. So I've now got you, Tim, down for like shooting 85%. On an array of threes, mid range, and teardrops, but Tim and I don't remember what game of the World Series it was. Was it Game 1? Was it?
It was Game 3. It was the first game in New York. It was on Halloween night, and we went up there just to shoot around. And then two guys walked in and said, "You guys want to play 2-on-2?" And one of them was
Adam Sandler. But I was going to say one of them was Mikey. A 17-year-old kid named Mikey. But my memory was that Sandler came in first and said, if a fourth guy comes in, do you want to play two? We could play 2-on-2. And then that fourth guy was a 17-year-old big kid named Mikey. Or at least Sandler called him Mikey. He introduced himself as Mike. And those two teamed up against you and I. We ran a lot of high-low. I tried to crash the offensive boards and just kick it back out to you.
I don't remember it that way.
That night at Yankee Stadium, we both go to cover the game. I'm walking in with my editor, Steve Cannella, and we're stopped at the press gate. Security carves a path, and a bodyguard brings Adam Sandler in through the press entrance. And I said to Sandler, I said, hey, Adam, a nice game today. And he looked at me and he shook my hand and said, you were great. And your buddy, that guy could shoot. And he was talking about you, Tim. And he wasn't wrong. And then my editor said, 10 seconds later, said, how the hell do you know Adam Sandler? And I said, well, we go way back to 2:00 this afternoon.
Right.
But Mikey, the 17-year-old kid playing hoops with Sandler, he was just kind of in disbelief the whole time.
Right. And he was really bad, Jeff. That's why we won so easily in the 7 games we played, because Mikey couldn't play at all. He tried to guard Stretch, and that didn't go very well.
And every time the ball would, because it was 2-on-2, it was half court, but every time the ball would roll to the other end of this empty court, Sandler would say, hey, Mikey, we're old. You go get it.
Right. So Stretch, I just want to tell you, you know this, but how much the game has changed in a lot of ways. I am older right now than the general manager and the manager of the Washington Nationals combined.
Of course.
They are 68 and I am 69 years old. And Jeff, Stretch and I go back to the time where the crusty old general manager and the manager kind of like ran the whole team.
Yes,
there was nobody else. Now there's an army of statisticians and assistant general managers. Stretch, you remember those days, right?
Of course. And you know, I my first job was with the Minnesota Twins when the Griffith family, Calvin Griffith, owned the team, and his family were all, you know, staffing the team. My boss was his like nephew running the you know, making the food that the vendors sold. You know, but the way your perspective changes, as you know, when you get older. When we were kids, Sparky Anderson was the oldest living human being, right? I mean, he was 1,000 years old. He was like 35. He had white hair. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm going to interrupt Stretch. Tell us about the interview that you did with Sparky, just the two of you, when you're doing a story on the ageless Sparky Anderson. Tell us what he did for you that day from a famous movie starring Leslie Nielsen.
I mean, I had so many great moments with Sparky, following him around to write, you know, a long story about him. But the Tigers of that time, I think it was like the Pete Incaviglia, Cecil Fielder era, they struck out a lot. And I think they struck out a lot this game when I was talking to him afterwards. And we were talking about strikeouts, and he said, you know, one of these days, I think the umpire's really going to put it to us. He's going to do that thing where, and he got out of his chair in the manager's office at Old Tiger Stadium, and he did the backwards Leslie Nielsen umpire. I mean, and he was genuinely old at this point. He was at least, I think, in his 70s. I mean, what was he at the end of his run with the Tigers? And he did the whole backwards thing, and he was howling with laughter as he did it. But my favorite thing on that story was, having been around him for a while, and I hadn't really noticed this before, he had this unbelievable diction, you know, the sort of Casey Stengel diction. And I said that to him, and he started laughing. And he said, you know, I really don't know the language. You know, there's three twos. There's T-O, there's T-W-O, and there's T-O-O. And he said it's like there. There's there, and there, with three different spellings. And he said, what difference does it make if I'm writing a letter to you? What difference does it make how I spell that, as long as you know there's a there there? There's a there there. This was completely spontaneous magic, you know, from Sparky. So
right. And Jeff, back then, again, it was a two-man show, and Howard Fox was the general manager. Stretch remembers him from the Twins. And Ray Miller, the manager of the Twins, told me, here we've got everything covered. We've got a camera everywhere. We've got data everywhere now. Howard Fox woke up one morning after a night game in which the Twins played on the West Coast, and he asked Ray Miller, how did you guys do last night? Like, he didn't even know who won the game, and he's the general manager of the team.
And he probably did say, how did you guys do? Not how did we do, but how did you guys do? Because if it's a loss, that's on you.
Right. And also back then, the Pirates had a general manager named Larry Doty, great guy and a good general manager, but he tended to like stretch the truth a little bit. And he was telling the coaches on the team that he could make a shot from the 3/4 court on a basketball court while sitting on his butt. So he would be... Look, I don't think even Stretch could make a shot from the free throw line while sitting on his butt. That's how much you need your legs to shoot. He said he could make basically a 75-foot shot from. But
I think there's a happy medium between, you know, the super analytical Moneyball, you know, just crunch the numbers, let the general manager dictate who's in the lineup. I think there is that may be one extreme, and then there's the general manager who is speculating. what distance he could make a shot from while sitting in an office chair at half court. Somewhere in between there, I think, is probably the sweet spot for a general manager. I do love, though.
Well,
I do think that you should probably keep up with how your team's doing, though, when they're on the West Coast.
This is the unfortunate truth of being a man, I've learned, is part of our brain power is used to make sure we explore these kind of idiot hypotheticals like God comes to you, or could you defeat a lion with a chainsaw, Dad? That's one of your favorites.
But for sure, Jeff, you're more genetically predisposed than most to ask and answer these inane scenarios. So when you are dropped from a helicopter, presumably with a parachute, onto the 18th green at Augusta, at the 18th tee at Augusta, and you're somehow not tased and loaded into a paddy wagon, never to be seen again, you have to give some thought to how you do with the 6-shot lead there, and that comes strictly from your dad. And now I'm getting some insight into the kind of conversations he was having with the Larry Doties of the world that made him this way.
A Stretch, we all already talked about Adam Sandler, but I think the most famous person I ever met was at the 2016 All-Star Game. I met Pitbull in Miami, and Adnan Virk, knowing I don't know anything about music, brings Pitbull over to me saying, "Hey, your greatest fan is standing right over here." So over comes Pitbull, Mr. 305. He gives me this complicated handshake, and he says, "I understand you're my biggest fan." And I swear, Stretch, I had no idea who he was. And Adnan ambushed me. It was so embarrassing. Fortunately, we got out of this. But the kicker to the whole thing is this, of course, goes out on the internet the next day. A picture of me and Pitbull. I swear to God, Mike Trout, the best player in baseball at the time, tackles me the next day. We're at the All-Star game. He tackles me and says, "I can't believe it. You met Pitbull. What was that like? Tell me how great it was." And he was so excited that I had met Pitbull, and I didn't even know who he was. That's ridiculous.
Pitbull probably knew who you are, though. I'm disappointed that I thought you were going to say Mike Trout tackled you and said, "Ron Say, I love you. I've got your card." But you said the most famous. That's not the most famous person you've ever met. But who is traditionally thought of as the most famous person in the world? It's often like the cliche is often it's the Pope. The Pope, who we now know has seen Wayne Nordhagen in shorts, and or the President of the United States. And I don't know if you talked about this, but when I went to the White House when George W. Bush was president, and he said to me in the 20 seconds or 10 seconds, our quote conversation was less than your speech at the Armenian Sports Hall of Fame. But what he said was, "I'm reading your friend Kurkjian's book. He had some nice things to say about you in there." And then that was it. It passed. And then I left the White House and I called you and I said, "The President of the United States just said he's reading your book and cited, page 37 or whatever when you said a nice thing about me." So,
well, I went to the White House 3 different times. We're not going to tell all those stories, but at the receiving line, he whispers to me. He says, "Who hit the home runs for the Yankees this morning?" Because they just played a game in Japan, and he was really, and the game had just ended, and we're going to lunch there, and he really wanted to know because he knew they scored a bunch of runs. He said, "Did Matsui hit a home run this morning?" And I had the answer for him, but that was what we talked about in the receiving line. Who hit the home runs for the Yankees?
And now I'm picturing a similar receiving line in 1976, and Howard Fox asks Jimmy Carter, "Can you tell me how the Twins did last night?" Because I wasn't able to catch the game.
All right, now Stretch. We're going to leave you on this since we love baseball cards. We do a little thing on our podcast. 3 cards in the bathroom. I just go reach for cards and I tell a story. So
Dad,
I'm going to
do you remember when you teased this segment 53 minutes ago?
Yes, but we never. So this will be the last thing. We've been here an
love
hour.
this.
We got to let poor Stretch go. Okay, so Stretch, I need you to tell a story about this baseball card. It's just the person on the card. It doesn't have to be specific. It's Lou Brock. So just tell us any Lou Brock story that you have, please.
Well, I mean, Lou Brock was the god of the stolen base when I was a kid. I mean, for all time, I guess. But what I remember most about Lou Brock, and I saw this sometime in the last 5 years, and it's probably on YouTube. But I watch a channel, one of these channels that all the commercials are for walk-in tubs and reverse mortgages, that replays the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. From the 70s and 80s. I think they destroyed all the shows from before he moved to LA in like 1972. But Lou Brock, I remember Lou Brock, and I will have to verify this, but I do remember Lou Brock being a guest on the Tonight Show with Johnny. The Cardinals must have been playing in Los Angeles. And this had been around, his great record-setting year of 1974, probably, when he was in the news all the time, or maybe it was 1975 after that year. And as a kid, I was 8 years old. I mistook all the time, or at least associated them, Lou Brock and Lou Rawls. You'll never find, I don't know why, but I remember driving to Chicago and Cincinnati. I think it was the summer of 75. And we only had an AM radio, and Lou Rawls says, "You'll never find." Jeff could sing it better than I. And I didn't know what Lou Rawls looked like, but he was later on like commercials for beer. But if I'm not mistaken, and this has nothing to do with baseball, Lou Brock on the Tonight Show with Johnny was sort of dressed real dapper, and I don't remember what his voice sounded like, but I somehow in my mind he both stole a lot of bases and had a beautiful baritone singing voice and was on the radio. So, and they were both named Lou, and I'm sure that's why I had that connection.
Well,
that's my
finish
Lou Brock story.
Right. I'm going back to Lou Brock in 1 second, but when I was a kid, my dad used to take us to the Shoreham Hotel to get autographs. Jeff knows the story. I go up to this man who I think is Campy Campaneris, the shortstop for the Oakland A's. Yeah. And he's in his street clothes, so I don't know the difference. So I asked for his autograph, and he says, "I'll sign your autograph, but I'm not a baseball player." So he signs it. I showed it to my father, and it was Harry Belafonte.
Come on.
I got it. Yes,
Come on.
I got Harry. Yes, I got Harry Belafonte's autograph because I thought he was Campy Campaneris. How about
that's incredible.
That? But Stretch, I need you to tell the story one more time, then I promise to let you go, about baseball cards. When you used to look at the back of Lou Brock's baseball card.
Oh, Lou Brock's baseball card. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. That's what. So the back of Lou Brock's 1974 Topps, they all had the little cartoon drawing, the little line drawing with one fun fact. And on the back of Lou Brock's baseball card, Lou runs a flower shop in the off season, right? And Lou Brock did own a flower shop in St. Louis for years. But the drawing was always the player in full uniform, right? George Mitterwall. George likes to take home movies. George is in full uniform. But Lou Brock was, like getting out of a van, delivering flowers, like Lou. And so as a kid, I assumed Lou Brock, if you order flowers for Mother's Day, Lou Brock will show up in his Cardinals uniform and deliver them. How awesome would it be to live in St. Louis? You've got to do a whole podcast someday for an audience of 3 on the 1974 Topps. We will go over every individual card. Every one of them is seared into my brain, and break down the guy, the picture, the cartoon on the back, because you say the Pitbull was the most famous guy you ever met. To me, anybody who was on one of those cards, Rick Stelmazik was the Twins coach forever. I couldn't believe that this guy, I could talk to this guy. He had stepped off a 1974 Topps card with like an Angels hat airbrushed onto him because he was with a different team every year. Those are the most famous guys to me who ever lived, was any of the 660 guys on the 1974 Topps.
Amazing.
Yeah,
and Jeff,
I mean,
just to finish,
similarly, remember
is this not the beauty of baseball? Is he's remembering baseball cards from 1974?
It's incredible. And I always loved the This Is Sports Center commercials when I was growing up, and that was my childhood. And I always thought to myself, do they really have Alex Ovechkin in full uniform making copies?
That's right. I didn't think of that. I wonder if that had any inspiration from those Topps things, because it was there's the Syracuse orange at the copy machine. That was the ethos of the 74 Topps. This guy likes to crochet in the offseason. Well, he does it in full uniform, And I assume they really did. Why wouldn't you? If you made the major leagues, I was 8 years old in 1974. Why wouldn't you wear your Kansas City Royals uniform year round? I would have.
Well, you look at Bryce Harper, who's now all over his social media making bread. He loves to make bread, and I would love to see the back of his card. Bryce Harper in the offseason loves baking his own bread, and he's there full uniform pulling out a loaf of the oven.
Pops, bring that back. Mike Trout enjoys meteorology, and there's Mike Trout at the green screen in his Angels uniform. Mike Trout can't believe Tim Kurkjian met Pitbull, and there's Mike Trout in full uniform tackling Tim.
With card collecting coming back, Steve, as big as it is now, it's maybe as big as ever.
Of course,
this is a genius idea.
I mean, I'm not sending my 74 Lou Brock off to get graded and put in a plastic slab. I wouldn't entrust that to. I wouldn't transport live organs like that. I wouldn't send my 74. I'm sure it's worth a nickel, every one of those cards, but I've got them in the basement and they're not going anywhere.
That is so great. Stretch, we could keep you for hours and hours. We kept you for over an hour, and our motto here is we laugh and we learn. I don't think we learned anything today, but we laughed for an hour and 10 minutes. At least I did.
We're slightly dumber than when we started, but I could do this for hours. So thank you guys.
Well, thank you, Stretch.